Well, this idea was put forth by Mr. Roddy, and there's a lot of music shows on YouTube. But hey, why not do another one?
Sure, why not?
Let's just jump in and do it. We have. We're not. We're gonna. We're for this first show. Will be the. This is gonna be another snarky thing, but we'll call ourselves. I don't know what we'll call ourselves, but we'll be the music show with no direction. That's such an inside joke there, but but anyway, okay, let's talk about the beginnings of our intro. I mean, are you a big music fan? Do you have a lot of records? Do you have a lot of? I mean, or you just listen to stuff on Spotify, or how do you do it?
I used to have
I
some
know,
records.
I know you lost a lot of stuff, but
Yeah,
that's
I
that's not for
couldn't.
public consumption or whatever.
Yeah, I couldn't afford a lot of records, and so I try to be judicious about what I bought.
When you were a kid,
Yeah, when I was
yeah,
kidding, and as an adult too, because it's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know, um, and a lot of time back then, if you liked a song, you had to, if it wasn't on a 45, you had to buy the album, and
Mm-hmm.
quite often you buy an album. Now one song's great, like Focus,
Hocus, I know,
Hocus
I
Pocus.
know.
I love
I'm
that song. You
applauding you
buy the
right
album,
now. Yes,
and then you
yes,
listen to it. Then the next song is moving.
yes, dude,
The whole
dude,
album is like soft stuff your mom would like. I'm like, what the hell
dude.
is this?
You are so a million percent right. My friend did that back when we were kids. That song was so cool with the yodeling and the great
Hmm.
guitar by Jan Ackerman. And my
Yeah,
friend bought the album. He could have bought the single. He could have bought it, but it was an edited version of it. He could have bought it for 69 cents, but he bought the album. And you're right, Moving Waves, it was called.
yeah,
The song comes on, knocks your socks off. And then afterwards, it's like all this beautiful classical music and movements and and you're like, huh?
right. It's confusing as hell.
Because back then you didn't, you just bought some stuff sight unseen.
Yeah, so I got burned with that one.
Did you
So
you bought that album,
I
huh?
bought
Moving
the
Waves.
album expecting all this wild, crazy music, and I used
Now
to,
Jan Ackerman, the guitars is a great guitar player. I don't
yeah,
know. I think they did other albums which were more like fusion or more,
right.
but that one sounded to me when I heard it as a kid. I've never heard it since. I know some people love it now. They think it's a great prog record, but it sounded to me exactly what you're saying, like a
Yeah,
classical
like
record.
classical stuff your mom would listen to. So I would,
And
and
your mother should know.
there were a couple of other albums that kind of happened. So I got really sort of nervous about buying
Well, yeah,
full
because you're dumping
albums.
$5 on an album in
Yeah,
1973.
yeah.
Five
I
bucks is that? You know how much $5 is? If you want to call it, if you want to consider it in comic book terms, comic books are probably 20 cents a piece. So what is that? 20 comics or something like that.
five,
5 comics is a buck.
five,
So five
25
times
comics.
5 times 25 comics.
Yeah, it's
Are
25
you
comics.
kidding me?
Yeah,
I'm going for the 25
expensive as hell.
comics. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So, yeah, so I would buy albums I knew I was going to like a little bit more of. And again, there was no way to listen to. If you were lucky, some places had like earphones you could put
We
on
never had those, but I've heard about them, like Tower
yeah, to
Records,
play
the
the records.
Tower or something. Well, you lived in New York, so you were like in the mecca of
Right,
entertainment there. You had all the comic stores and all the
right,
great record stores, and
right.
in the
So
70s anyway.
the radio station I used to listen to was WNEW FM. They played progressive rock and regular rock. And usually at night, there was a
Allison Steele.
DJ, Dennis Elsis, and then after him was Allison Steele.
She has a Facebook page, by the way.
Yeah. And they would play a lot of progressive rock you wouldn't necessarily hear on the
Sure,
regular
like
radio.
Focus.
Yes, like
But then
Focus.
again, Hocus Pocus was a big AM hit, so
Yeah. King Crimson, Traffic,
Genesis,
Jethro
Kraftwerk,
Tull. Yeah.
Vandergraaf Generator,
Yeah. So you'd hear all these
Caravan,
great
you name it.
bands, and I would write. Sometimes they would play several songs in a row, and then would announce them, so you'd have to write it down quickly so you can know what to look for in the record store and stuff. But sometimes they never said what the name of the song is, and you're like, "Urgh." So
I got to tell you though, there's on YouTube. They put out the midnight specials.
mhm.
Old. There's one that showed that had Focus playing Hocus Pocus, and they're playing it at like turbo speed, and
Wow,
Jan Ackerman is ripping that guitar. It's
wow,
pretty awesome.
wow.
That's pretty awesome. It's on YouTube. Just look up the midnight
Well,
special. I forgot who the host was, but I think they do it and then they come back at the end of the show and they play it again because
wow.
it was amazing. But at any rate, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Buying albums and buying singles.
Right.
You don't have any money as a kid.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes if you were lucky, there would be several hits from an album that you would go, okay, so I can kind of
Like a
buy
greatest
this.
hits album or
It's like
something,
Pink Floyd, "Wish You Were Here."
or Dark Side of the Moon or
Dark
something.
Side of the Moon, yeah. Which is funny. Every time I went to buy Dark Side of the Moon, they were out.
Really?
The record store. Yeah, well, I guess it was so popular. And that's how I got "Wish You Were Here" because I wanted a Pink Floyd album
Yeah.
back then, and that's all I could get my hands on.
Yeah, yeah. Great album too.
Yeah, it's a good album. I like it. Not one of my
It's really
favorites,
good, really
but
good.
it's a good album.
I actually like it. I actually like it better than Dark Side, but that's just me.
Yeah, yeah. After Dark Side, and
Animals was okay,
I never liked Animals. It's just
and The
it's
Walls is too overblown. It's like a rock opera, but I don't know. It was a little too much.
yeah. Usually, I think "Wish You Were Here" came out after Dark Side. I think that's the
Wish
last.
Wish You Were Here was to me the proggiest. They had a lot of
Yeah,
synthesizers and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Dark Side was good, but
Dark Side's a classic, but I never actually bought that album. It was given to me. So I
mm,
never actually bought it. That record was like every song was on the radio back in the 70s. Every song,
yeah,
even the Great Gig in the Sky, always on the radio. So why do I want to buy it? I already heard it,
yeah,
you
exactly,
know? I mean, if you buy it, you're just basically buying it and you're hearing it on the radio the next day. So,
exactly.
but no,
Yeah.
I started with the Beatles. I mean, when I was a kid in the late 60s, we lived near a department store called Zares, which I think up north there was called Ames.
Yeah, something like that.
We lived like across the street from it. So
Hmm.
I seem to remember back then going there, and even back then in the late 60s, they would have cutouts.
Mm.
And I actually bought, what was it, Something New by the Beatles and Beatles 65 as cutouts because, and I now think that what it was their mono versions and they were converting them to stereo. So I think they were trying to get rid of the mono ones. But I remember buying Something New by the Beatles and Beatles 65 for like $1.80 each. So I mean that was
Yeah,
a great deal. You're
yeah,
getting Beatle albums, which means tons of hits. You're
yeah.
not you're not gonna like you're not gonna buy something because you know what the thing was too around that time was that they used to show the Beatle cartoons
Hmm.
on television. So the Beatle cartoons would play the hits, but they'd also play the deep tracks. So you kind of knew a lot of these songs already, so you
Yeah.
weren't going to be like totally disappointed. Oh yeah, I know that song. That's a good song. So that's where I started.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would never. But then, what I would do if I didn't have any money, which was usually because I was spending money on comics.
Yeah.
Comics was number one, and then music. But my grandfather had a turntable and he had some equipment. But I remember like I forgot what year it was. It was when the Monkees album came out. Like my
Hmm.
dad got me some where he worked at. He got me this cheapo little Juliet turntable. Juliet was like the bargain basement brand from back then. It was like one of those close and plays almost, and he bought me one of those so I could play my records in my room. And I remember having those Beatle records. There was a supermarket too near where I live called
Hmm.
Stevens. Supermarkets and department stores had record department. A lot
Yeah.
of department stores had record sections, but some
Yeah.
supermarkets did too. I
Back
remember
then,
buying.
I remember department stores had like the ones we would go to. They had a
Yeah.
food section, a toy section, a book section.
Yes.
It was mostly clothes, but they also had like some tools, just depending on.
And
They had,
a great music
yeah,
section.
yeah,
The
great
greatest
music
albums.
section. Yeah. Although sometimes you'd go to a section and the rock, there'd be little bins, and the rock section would be like a 12 by 12 box with all the rock records in it.
Oh no, no, not where I lived. I mean that
Yeah.
record store Stevens, they had an actual record rack with like it wasn't huge, but it was like at least if I remember, and again, this is like going back a million years ago, at least a rack with at least 5 or 6 bins of records.
Right.
And at Stevens is where I bought Yesterday and Today by the Beatles and Sergeant Pepper's by the Beatles. I bought those at a supermarket.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like across the street was this place called Richards. I used to live in the Hialeah, and Richards department store also had a record section,
Right.
which is bigger. I remember seeing like Frank Zappa, "You Were in It for the Money" and all that stuff, and going like, "What the hell is this? Are they making fun
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
Beatles?" And then across the street there was another store called J. Byron's or Jackson Byron's. They had a record section.
Yeah.
And then it was called Palm Springs Mall. Then 2 stores down from them was a five and dime called GC Murphy's. They
Mhm.
had a record section and they had
Yeah.
45s, and they had
Woolworths
cheap.
had, yeah, Woolworths up near us had record section. Kresge's had a
Yeah,
record
Kresge's, yeah,
section. Uh, McCrory's, and yeah, you could go
McCrory's.
to supermarkets. They'd have a record section. It's right near the book section. It was great because you could find, and sometimes like in the five and dimes, you could find a cheaper cut
You,
or a compilation or something.
what I would
Biggest
do
hits.
Here's what I would do with the five and dime. They would have a bin with 45s that were made that were like that they were a little bit older. They would
Yeah.
sell them three for a dollar.
Wow.
So I'd go in and get three for a dollar. I'd get like I remember one time getting like three different, like this is 73, getting three different Elton John singles. And okay, for a buck, I've got half an album kind of, because you
Yeah.
get the song and you get the B side. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's works for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was another store. They had Murphy's, which was five and dime. 3 stores down from them, they had another store called Neisner's. That was another five and dimes. You had two five and dimes right in the same, but they were like everywhere. It's like comic books were everywhere back then.
Yeah.
They were in every drugstore and every 7-Eleven. Records were everywhere.
Yeah.
Every
Because it was
department
cheap
store had a record
entertainment.
section.
Yeah, it was cheap entertainment, and people wanted to, back then, listening to music, people instead of like watching TV, they'd put an album on and listen to it.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
when
My
you have your
grandfather had a
friends come over, you bring albums, and you'd put them on and just sit there and listen to them and play. And if you were lucky, the mom would come in and give you snacks.
yeah, and with the advent of cheap little turntables, that means any kid could have one. It wasn't
Right.
just an AM radio. I had an AM radio when I was in the 60s, which was just listening to it. So when I got a turntable, it was like, oh, I have my own
Yeah.
private. So I mean, I remember getting that turntable and buying the first Monkees album.
Yeah.
And
I
then a
think
couple of years later,
my first turntable came from Sears,
that's probably a
which I
better
bought with my
brand.
own money. Bought with my own money, and I think it was like the hefty price of like $39 or something like that.
Yeah.
But and then my younger sister got one, and hers was fancier than mine. She's like a year and a half younger than me, but she was really into music. She had records. She would play classical music, rock and roll, pop music, ballet, opera. Yeah, she was a real
A
music buff.
connoisseur.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I had my little turntable and I play like the albums, the 45. The 45s, you need the little
Yeah,
45 deal
the
to
little
put them on
insert.
there. Yeah, you had to do that crap or whatever. So, if I didn't have the money, but I mean, I would get like a Beatle record
Yeah,
once a year for Christmas or,
yeah,
I usually never had. I mean, the one that I really wanted, this is incredible. I never actually got the complete version of it. I could never get the White Album as a kid because that was like an $8 record.
yeah.
It was a double. So when I started working in the 70s, I bought it at a store. But guess what? The copy that I have, which was a repress, doesn't have the photos and all the goodies in it. So I don't know what the deal was. Somebody either brought it back and kept all the goodies.
Oh,
So I
maybe.
have it, a 70s or 60s, late 70s version of it or mid 70s, but it has no pictures, none of that stuff. So I've got it. I have one of these days I'll have to buy a crappy copy of it just to get all the goodies from
Yeah,
inside of
just
it.
to get
But
all the goods.
that was one that I never was able to get. All the rest of them I had as Christmas presents or or like I said, later on I filled in the gaps. And I remember like even up to what was it, the 90s, the late 80s or the 90s. I believe I remember going to a record store in Broward County down in South Florida, and I think
Hmm.
they still were making Beatle vinyl. Like they were
Hmm.
still repressing some of the old
Yeah.
records. I remember buying like Rubber Soul like in the late 80s because I never had it as a kid. And it seemed like it was a newer pressing or something like that. And it was only like $5 or $6. So
Wow.
unless it came from another country or something, I don't know. But yeah, we had a ton of record stores. I mean, we don't have hardly any here anymore. We have one record store in town, and that's it. The
I
rest
think,
of the stuff is online or flea markets or something.
yeah, if you go, well, we know we have
Do they
FYE.
still sell music there?
I think they still sell movies and also still sell the
Okay,
CDs and some
that's at the mall, right?
collectible malls. Yeah, but the thing is, I haven't been to a mall in ages, so
There's one here, but
a
I
lot
it's
of them close. A lot of stores. You go to a lot of these malls, and half the stores are closed.
yeah, or they're like
Very
weird stores.
sad, you know.
Like I went to the store like after like during before right before Christmas. First time I've been to a mall in ages, and it was like they had a store that had music stuff in it, but it was kind of it almost looked like kind of a head shop. It was weird, you
Oh,
know.
yeah,
And I went to FYE, but all they had was mostly like Funko Pop
yeah,
crap. And in the back they had some music, but back then you could buy stuff like everywhere. And there was Peaches Records where we used to go to like on Friday nights after we got
mhm,
paid and buy Peaches in Sunrise Boulevard. That's where I bought a lot of. That was in the later 70s, and I bought a lot of stuff there. But and then there was another place called Sid's that was a little bit further down. It was near Fort Lauderdale Beach, and they have bootlegs. And I
mhm,
had no idea
mhm.
what a bootleg was until I met a couple of friends of mine in college, and they were like, "Oh yeah, what's a bootleg?" Well, it's an album that's not it's
Yeah,
like a radio show or an audience thing, and it's not legit. But if you're a fan of the band and you want to hear more from them,
right.
and those things were weird too because you could be spending $5 for a bootleg and you don't know what the hell it's going to sound like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because
Yeah,
sometimes my girlfriend in college bought a lot of bootlegs, and sometimes the sound was pretty good. You'd hear the audience screeching and yelling and stuff, and sometimes you could barely hear the recording or the sound.
here's one right here. Neil Young, the days of it's like a bootleg. It's from where is it from? It's a boot. I think it's from Texas or something like that. But it's just a bunch of it's
Huh?
just an acoustic show that he did. He's stoned out of his mind, but the sound but the sound quality is really good. And the thing about bootlegs was guys like Neil Young would do unreleased songs
Yeah.
and they'd be on bootlegs and they wouldn't be
Yeah.
on his record. So like I'll give you an example of one on here that wasn't on his record at the time. Is there one in here? Maybe once I was in love and too far gone. Those didn't come out till years later
Wow,
on
that's cool.
vinyl.
Yeah.
Now he's got archives and he puts out all this stuff, but that's the only way you could find that song. Neil Young was a big one where he would do so many live songs that weren't on an album, which would
Right.
later turn up. The only way you're going to hear him is on a bootleg.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it's a bootleg of a guy and playing acoustic, you get a better chance of getting decent sound quality
Right.
if the guy was up close or whatever. But if you get a band with drums and bass and all
Yeah.
that stuff, it could be a muddy mess. And I
Yeah.
bought a few of those.
It depends on the acoustics in the building they're playing in, and you know if the guy has his recorder tuned right, or if you can get a better position to listen to them and stuff.
But yeah, I would listen to the FM radio after in the 70s when the FM started to pick up and it was more
Yeah.
popularized. I would listen to that and I would hear stuff that I didn't hear they would play more deep tracks. But
Yeah,
usually it's stuff late at night, you know what I mean? They
yeah,
would
it
play
was
like
late at
odder.
night. Yeah, FM music late at night was great. There was some, was it King Biscuit Flour
King
House?
Bixby, that was on Sundays. I would record those.
Yeah, they would play like live shows and such.
And a lot of those King Biscuit shows
Yeah,
ended up on bootleg vinyl. Somebody would record them off the air, and then, but they you wouldn't know until you played it. You know, they would be like, you know, like a King Crimson show from King Biscuit, and all of a sudden you see a bootleg of King Crimson, and if you're lucky, you take it home and it's a radio show and it sounds great.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and again, it's the only time you could hear because I don't know how often or if ever they would repeat shows.
No, and a lot of these bands you just bought their vinyl and you never heard them play live.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Yeah,
King Crimson was a big improv band.
yeah,
So you're playing them live, hearing them live. You're seeing these songs like sounding different. If you like it, some people are weird. I mean, well, not weird. It's their taste. Some people want to go to a concert and see the band play the song exactly like the album. That's
yeah.
fine. But King Crimson would expand it and do like all sorts
And
of
do
like,
different things and experiment and yeah.
yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of concerts, but the few I went to,
I went to a bunch.
I liked because they would do different things, and then did also banter or talk to the audience
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
So it wasn't too bad. Yeah, but again, it's for me too many people around making noise or standing up when you
yeah.
get to
Standing
see.
up in front of you, dancing while you're trying to watch the band.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
shaking their butt in front of you and like,
yeah,
And now they hold the phone up and and they block your
which is
vision
even
or
worse.
whatever.
It's like watch the friggin' concert. Don't film it because you're never going to watch it later.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, I remember. I don't remember ever buying a record because of the cover. Maybe if it was a band that I knew, I might have done it. But there's a lot of people that would buy an album just because the cover looked cool. I don't know. I never had like $4 to burn like that to be
Yeah,
able to do
I
that.
would see a lot of cool. I remember Mastodon had a lot of cool covers,
Hmm.
but it's like, yeah, I didn't have the money to, plop down and get the record just because the cover was cool.
Yeah, yeah. And then there were some record stores. Here's another one that got me collecting more. Well, a lot of these were that were used records. I'd buy a lot of used
Yeah,
records.
yeah,
Like the smaller stores would have used records. The Peaches was usually cutouts. That was the other thing. It was the regular albums and the cutouts. So ones that didn't sell well, you could buy for $2 or $3.
yeah.
But the smaller stores, like I think there was one called Sid's and Record Lounge. They had used records. So for
Yeah,
half the price, you could get, you know,
yeah, some
you
pretty
could
nice
get
records.
you could get like you could get like King Crimson, like this one, in the Wake of Poseidon. That was
Mm,
like a $2, and I played it a couple of years ago. It's a perfect
yeah,
vinyl.
that's
Somebody
cool.
must not have played it much, But yeah, I'd buy some of them. Some of them even have the sticker prices on them. Let me see here. I think this McCartney one. Oh, I paid a lot for this one. I paid for the first McCartney. I paid $8 for it, but you can see the sticker right there.
Yeah,
I think this was a couple of years ago. You probably in the old days you could probably get that for $3 or
yeah,
something,
yeah.
you know. But no, yeah, yeah, and then there was the bootlegs and the King Crimson and the King. We used to get the King Biscuit Radio Hour, and then
Mm.
we used to get one called the BBC Rock Hour afterwards on Sundays.
Oh,
And BBC would play like British bands, Roxy Music, Ultravox, David Bowie, Mott the Hoople, whatever, Genesis.
wow.
And King Crimson and King Crimson, King Biscuit did play British bands,
Right.
but I think they centered more on American music. I could be wrong on this, but the BBC was definitely like Brit bands.
Yeah.
And every Sunday, if I wasn't out, I'd be there with my because at some point, like in the when I hooked up with my friends Jim and Pat, they turned me on bootlegs and all that. And then I started working and I had the ability, they had the money to buy a receiver, a turntable, and a cassette deck.
Mm-hmm.
So I would record the King Biscuits.
Yeah.
I still have some buried somewhere. I still have some Genesis show or some Roxy Music, so they probably are unplayable now. But I used to record them on time if I like the band.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes it would be like some band that, I mean, somebody might like them, like, oh, this week on King Biscuit, REO Speedwagon, I'll pass.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the best ones that I ever recorded off of King Biscuit, I think it was King, no, it was the BBC Rock Hour. You ever heard of a guy called Loudon Wainwright? It was one of the greatest shows. I don't have it anymore. I think I lost it or it broke or something, but it was one of the greatest. But I mean, that's how I found out about him.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
that's how you found out. I used to listen to a lot of, I still do on occasion, college radio because they
Yeah.
will play some new bands you don't hear of. Because all the radio stations around me play classic rock, which can include like Jethro Tull,
Yeah.
King, well, rarely King Crimson, but they'll also play like Bon Jovi and
Yeah.
like REO
Somebody
Speed.
that's been around for a while, but I don't consider it classic rock. Like
Yeah,
Jethro Tull's
exactly.
classic rock. Bon
Yeah.
Jovi's whatever,
So I try to listen
hard rock, metal.
to college
Very
radio
heavy.
because you can hear some really new, unique stuff.
Well, you
So
guys had WLIR there. They had radio
yeah,
broadcasts.
yeah,
They would
WLIR.
actually go and record their own shows from local from that
Yeah,
from bands that were big bands, and they would play them on WLIR that you wouldn't get like anywhere else because it was your
right. I can remember WLIR. They would play all the new British stuff like a
yeah.
year early. And then I can remember listening to WNEW saying, "Oh, like a year later, we have this, this debut of this, band and song," and they would play. I'm like, I heard that a year ago. But
Yeah, no. I mean, we only had one big station down in South Florida. We had WSHE.
uh
They were the ones that played most of the stuff, but after a certain point, they became kind of corporate, and
yeah,
they started just playing like I don't know, stuff that wasn't cool anymore. It was okay. It was still
yeah,
okay, but it was kind of like a lot of Journey, REO sticks,
yeah,
whatever, which is fine, but it's not my. But before like 75, they would be playing like, could be anything. It could be
yeah,
like ELP, it could be Led Zeppelin, it could be Uriah Heep, it could be anybody like that. But then when it got all corporate and programmed, what was the guy's name that started that concept? His name was Lee Abrams. He started up a concept of like I think it had something to do with they would do measurements or some kind of early version of algorithms on what songs were the most popular, and then they would give it to the stations, and that would be their playlist. But before that, it was just like you at least had to play Stairway to Heaven like 3 or 4 times a
yeah,
day in the 70s.
yeah. Yeah.
I know
Like,
they did that in Miami. I love the song, but
yeah, it's almost like you turn on the radio and it's like the same 17 songs in a row. So the morning show doesn't sound any different than the afternoon show or the drive time show or the evening show.
well,
It's
the
just
evening shows, you know what they would do down there where I lived at night? Maybe not in the later time, but the early time, they would play like stuff they wouldn't play during the day. Like I remember one night, it was like 10 o'clock, and he goes, and now we're gonna play some Neil Young music to slit your wrist with Down by the River. Yeah, they would do shit like that, It's like, and then they play like 10 minutes of Down by the River or whatever. So they would do that every once in a while. But during the rush hour or whenever the people were in
yeah,
their cars or when they were like awake, they would concentrate on more stuff that was deemed to be friendly
yeah,
and popular because they're selling
mainstream. Yeah,
advertising,
yeah, yeah.
You know.
They would go by
Plus,
demographics, 18 to
yeah.
or
Plus, I remember back then they used to do stuff that they don't do now anymore. They did them during the day and sometimes at night. During the afternoons, I remember the station down there. There was another station that came on in the later 70s, early 80s called WGTR. That was a rock station, but they were more like harder rock, Aerosmith, whatever. They would do like a midday. They would do like a midday record. They would do like a midday and they would play like theme songs or
right,
something like
right.
that. But then I remember in the 70s, maybe it was the earlier 70s, sometimes at night they would play a side of a record,
Oh,
like an
that's
entire
cool.
side of a record,
Yeah, that's cool.
like side one of Led Zeppelin 4,
Yeah,
side one of Neil Young's Tonight Tonight, and just kind of like, and just do it like, it was free form. That was cool. Because
yeah,
then you would hear stuff that you wouldn't hear because it wasn't just the songs that somebody decided that these are the songs you want to play off this record. Don't play any of the other ones.
yeah,
Just play these. That's what it was. Did somebody deemed just play these two or three songs? These are deemed by us, the gods of programming, to be the songs you play. Nothing else.